Hey there, Twitch. How we doing today? I am James Spencer. I am a partner solutions architect here at AWS. I am joined by my colleague on this side, Prachi. How are you doing today, Prachi?
Good. How are you, James?
Good, good. How's Reinforce has been going strong? I thought there'd be an all-day stream, but we got
Yeah,
lucky.
I got confused when we logged in. I was seeing something else. So glad that everything worked out for us today.
Yeah, I went last year. Reinforce was fun. Yeah, LaunchDarkly, Robert. I'm a big fan. I'm not a shill, I promise. But I'm excited. I know a lot about LaunchDarkly's feature flags, but we're not going to just talk about feature flags today. Cody's going to tell us about a bunch of other stuff. Prachi, just really quick, can you tell us what feature flags are?
Yeah, so I am not a developer myself, but just to give you an idea there, so when we are really during the software development cycle, if we are launching new features or using version controls, we often tend to mark certain things for version releases. So if you have certain features that you want to release, or you say if you want to bog down on those features, you generate feature flags to quickly just basically provide enhancements to your features or add new features to your software development cycle. So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me from a non-expert perspective. We'll bring our expert on in a second. I got ahead of myself first, though. Welcome to Howdy Partner. If you're not familiar with Howdy Partner, it's our show we do every week here on the AWS Twitch channel, where we bring partners from the APN on to show us their offerings, show us their solutions to make our life easier, our lives better, remove even further that undifferentiated heavy lifting, and make your cloud computing stronger. We get hands on, we go behind the diagrams and the white papers. We bring our experts on to show us what they got. Hey Alex, how you doing? How's and anyone from chat, if you ever have any horror stories from development, let me know. It's always fun to talk about, or some great things. But I'm gonna shut up. I talk too much, and I will bring on our friend Cody Arkland from LaunchDarkly. Hi Cody, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are
Good,
you all?
great.
Doing
Howdy,
great.
partners. Is that
Yeah,
a thing? Is that a thing? Am I allowed?
absolutely, absolutely. I didn't bring my cowboy hat today, but
Man.
cool. So what do we got? I mean, we mentioned feature flags, and I know that's like kind of the big thing. We're going to talk about other stuff, but did we get it right? Were we kind of close? A little bit.
Yeah, totally. I think that like so many things in tech, the initial definition is usually just like a foundation of like interesting things people can do with it, right? And so like at its very like basic level, a feature flag is just an if then statement, right? If something is true, do a thing. Otherwise, do the other thing. But there's like really interesting ways that people take that
Mhm.
same concept and apply it to other stuff. And then there's things that LaunchDarkly does to kind of layer on top of that and add capability. Like, for example, what if you want only James to get one version of the feature flag, but Prachi and I get the default version, right? That lets us do like interesting test scenarios. Or what if you want only people on the West Coast to receive that value? Then you get to
Mhm.
do like geolocation based rollouts, and like it gets really interesting. And then what like in the in the big version, like what is code, right? It's functionality, right? So what if you're rolling out a new database? What if you're rolling out a new login screen? What if you're rolling out new APIs? So like again, that the basic version of that feature flag concept just starts to expand and become really interesting kind of the wider you go with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Whenever people ask me, I kind of say that it's not. It's always hard for me to like give a good explanation. I say it's not a replacement for version control, but there's
Mhm.
things that people use version control for that are much better done with feature flags. Like you said, the rollouts, the testing, the different versions per user kind of thing. The VIP James version versus the default Prachi and Cody version. Um,
But
but yeah, that's awesome.
to that point, think about the version control like downstream of it. Like we're diving in head first here. Think about like if you're doing this all in version control, then we roll out. The three of us decide to break off and build our own shirt company, right? And we build our website. We roll out this new storefront. and we're doing version control really well. We're storing it in Git. Life is good. We build a new version of the page and ship it out. Well, we have to compile. We have to deliver that out to whatever place. We're going to run it in AWS, obviously, right? So we have to recompile it. We have to ship it out somewhere. And then there's a problem, and we need to roll back to the previous version. So do we recompile the old code? Do we use an old image? Do we redeploy? Right? So like all valid answers, but what if you've got a flaky build pipeline? Well, like 80% chance you roll back on the first try, maybe 20% chance takes you 3 or 4 tries. And so like, yeah, totally can do this in version control, but you have to deal with the downstream impacts of that, like recompile, rebuild, reship. What happens during that time where things are broken? How do you get granular with that? Right? It's just things get complex from there.
Yeah. Rolling back releases and undoing deployments. I mean, there's all sorts of deployment strategies, obviously, for that stuff, but that definitely makes life a lot easier when you can just turn something on and off. When it's broken, oh, this ain't working. We don't have to roll back. We just flip a switch, basically, for the most part.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Cody, but can we put it as basically say it elevates some of the pains that we go through when we're using version control and allows us to basically do it in more granular fashion and an easier fashion?
Yeah, I think like this is like the traditional "why not both" meme moment. Like it's like the best organizations are going to have both, right? Where you're using feature flags to break your code into manageable chunks and saying, hey, these individual components are feature flagged around them, and you're using the feature flag to turn those on and off, but you're still tracking the overall activities inside of version control. I think there are like behaviors inside of version control that you want, if you're going to do like feature flagging really well, that you want to focus on. Like we talk a lot about like trunk-based development, right? So for those who aren't in the know, you typically have 2 different kinds of source control development methodologies. You have branch-based deployments, or branch-based, where everybody on the development team, 3 of us, there's a main, we each take a branch, we build our own version, we commit those back into the main, we sort out any merge conflicts, and life goes on. Trunk-based development is where we're all working generally off of that main branch, that main version of the repo, and we're committing often into that, or we're merging often into that. So there's branches are very short-lived and frequently getting merged back into main just to keep conflicts low. And in the case of like feature flags, so you all are able to consume the flags that I'm creating, because what gets really messy is when we've got all three of us have a long-lived branch, and I've created 2 or 3 feature flags. Each one of you have created ones that are separate, and we're completely managing these all separately. That just gets really confusing. And then when we go to merge them all together, what if you've created a flag that overlaps with one of my features that I've feature flagged? It becomes a mess. So we tend to be more proponents of driving like trunk-based development, where everything's getting back into the main often. But like these are very valid parts of how you adopt feature flags.
Yeah. I came from a place where we did branches, and whenever someone would have a branch that was out for 6 weeks, and then they finally were supposed to be done, and then it took a whole day to try and push it back in. So yeah, I know that pain very well.
100%. And like that's the toughest moments that we find are when people are doing they have these long like merge conflicts where they're spending several days trying to sort out, how do I not overwrite the work someone else did but still get my content in. And like it's painful, especially on a 6-month long-lived branch. Like that's rough. I mean, you're talking potentially hundreds of lines of code you have to like sort out and kind of pick around.
Okay, so I think we should start by there's someone asking in the chat, what is LaunchDarkly, guys? So if we want to just start by first an introduction, Cody, from your side, about LaunchDarkly itself for people who are new.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit, and then I'll show. I promised James that I would keep the slides extremely minimal. We want to actually get in and actually show some stuff, like actual hands-on things. So I'll pull up some slides in a minute here. We'll talk a little bit. I'll bring up some slides and just show a couple of pictures, and then we'll get into the actual product and show and you'll guys be able to experience it. I'll drop some links in the chat that you guys can actually
cool.
watch as I make the like feature flag changes. You can watch and kind of simulate what it would look like if we were on an actual application. But as far as like what is LaunchDarkly, let's start with like just the name. Like LaunchDarkly, what does that actually mean? So LaunchDarkly comes from the idea of dark launching, the idea of releasing a feature into an environment with selectively controlling who's seeing that. So it's dark launching. It's launching without many people knowing. So as an example, if I'm rolling out a new login page, right? I've constructed a new login UI, optimized better, maybe different style. Maybe I'm just rolling out a new theme for my website in general. Rolling that out to everybody all at once creates a massive blast radius or a massive radius of things that can go wrong, right? If something breaks, it's going to hit everybody in that group. And LaunchDarkly lets us turn those on and off, right? So we can wrap that feature in a feature flag and say, hey, if the feature is on, everyone can see the UI or the new theme. If it's off, nobody can see it. So we get a lot of like risk protection there from like instant on and off thing, and we don't have to recompile, we don't have to reship the code. Like it's all there and able to be turned on and off very quickly. But again, our blast radius is still 100%. So if I've broken something in that login process, when I turn that on, everyone's experiencing that break. I can turn it off very fast, and I can give that ability to the ops team so that when they get a 2 a.m. phone call that says, hey, logins aren't working, they can turn it off. But it's still, again, 100% blast radius. So what if you could say, I want to control who's experiencing that? This is where like LaunchDarkly really shines and where you start to really get like the power of this concept. When I can say everyone whose name starts with J is going to receive the new login UI. It's a bit of a silly example. What we see like most commonly is I want to give my dev team this access. So if Prachi and James are on my dev team, I can add them both to the targeting rule and say only they are able to see us. So when they log in, they're going to see the new theme for the website, but nobody else is going to. And now we can test as a group and say, okay, is this working how we would expect? If it is, maybe we go to our PM and say, hey, development's looking good for the new UI for the site. I think we're ready to expand this out to like the EAP customers, right? Like we all know what it's like to have EAP customers who are early access. They're hitting new versions of our site. We use them for feedback on how things are going inside of our platform. So then we add that EAP group to our targeting rules, and now they're able to see it too. Maybe we still feel good about it. We dark launched it now. Not everybody's able to see it. That feature is launched for a selective group. We've completely controlled our blast radius. Now we want to expand out and say, we're feeling really good about this. Let's do the entire West Coast. And everything goes wrong, right? We release out to West Coast, and now we hit capacity issues. We did not gauge, certain amounts of inbound user traffic. We didn't gauge browser compatibility. We didn't gauge what it was like for a mobile device. All of these things that can go wrong, right? We didn't gauge those things. So there's a problem. We can remove then like the West Coast back out and go back to our EAP customers only. So you get this fine-grained ability to roll out and roll back change. That is effectively LaunchDarkly in the smallest nutshell. But everything else that we do builds off of that. So what if you want to measure, right? As an example, you've built this new theme, and your goal of that was to create better engagement with the important parts of your website. Maybe you have a store and you want to make sure that as part of the new theme rollout that people are hitting the high value components that you're selling. We sell t-shirts, and we want these 3 kinds of t-shirts to be the ones people buy the most. Well, we have experimentation built into the product to where you can say, I want to measure how often people are purchasing based on that new version. So if I've rolled this out to the West Coast, but the rest of the world has the old version, I can measure within the West Coast, how many are people clicking on that more now? Are people using that new functionality more? So this builds on that idea of a feature flag, right? The feature flag just turns something on or off, but now we're able to collect data off of that and make decisions based on like, how well is that performing? Did we do the right thing, or did we just make something that looked prettier, but it didn't actually solve any problems? So data comes off of that. We can use that same concept to roll out new databases, new APIs, all of that. But at a ground floor, that is LaunchDarkly. I will pause for discussion.
No, yeah, yeah, that's kind of you're talking about the kind of the deeper level. Like whenever people ask me, I always give that higher level of, just turning stuff on and off, or, you know, removing doing those things with flags that people would typically do with source control. But then you're going a little bit deeper into stuff that I have to remind myself of. Yeah, like rolling out test cases in like a store, like you said, capturing that data and then saying, nope, these products suck anyway, so let's toss them out. It's not worth the shelf space or whatever, anything like that. Um, I don't know. Let's see what else I'm trying to think of.
So I
Database. Oh, so go ahead.
no, I was just asking that you mentioned about just we're talking about back and forth about this turning on and off the flags. So is like it's kind of a deeper question. So are these the only type of flags supported, or is there any other types of flags that I can do? Just say more than if else conditions.
Absolutely. So feature flags exist beyond just LaunchDarkly, right? So people
Mm-hmm.
use feature flags in their own controls, and again, they'll change a feature flag value, recompile the code, and ship it off. But within LaunchDarkly, we can create, and just like in regular feature flags, people can create flags around really any kind of parameters. In LaunchDarkly, we have Boolean flags, so that's like the if it's on or off, true or false. We can do string-based flags, so people will use those for pushing like connection strings as an example for like the
Mm-hmm.
database example. You want to be able to control based on a feature flag what database is being connected to. Somebody might use a string flag to just push a string of text. People use JSON flags to push kind of configuration blocks, right? They'll build like a structure of some data in a JSON format, and they'll pick out values, parse values out from that. And then we do integer flags also, so like numeric flags based as needed. But I'd say the most common that I see a lot of definitely a ton of true false flags, and a ton of string flags, and then some Boolean flags, and not as many integer based flags, but they're there.
Awesome. Yeah, that kind of extends the scope exponentially. Yeah. Okay. Makes
Totally.
sense.
I have a question, and then I'm sure we'll go into this. I'm getting ahead of myself. I've played with LaunchDarkly stuff using some code in GitHub and basically using the UI for management of all that stuff. Is there anything beyond the UI? Can we do it from like code CLI level? Can we do it like in? I mean, we're turning it on. We're basing it on the code itself, but can we handle it in code or APIs?
So you definitely can manage LaunchDarkly inside of like the API. We have a Terraform provider that a lot of people will use for doing like standardized infrastructure as code approaches, um, to like their actual feature flagging and all of that. Most people use the UI. A lot of people use the VS Code plugin to manage it. So
Hmm.
like as you're building out your features, you'll go in and like toggle stuff on from within VS Code. The API is definitely there. We don't really have a CLI specifically for it, just because like the nature of the workflow doesn't really align to like a CLI model. Um, just because like the activity of like turning something on or off is typically the light switch effect. Uh, but definitely API. We do a lot of people will use APIs as to do really creative things with the platform.
Yeah, I didn't even think of the VS Code extensions or whatever. That's awesome. Like that makes you don't. Everyone loves VS Code. I love VS Code. I love my extensions. Everyone does.
Right?
So that makes it even cooler. I like that. Excuse me. Um,
You want to see it? Maybe we'll skip the slides and we'll just get into actually showing off the product. Should we show some stuff?
yeah, absolutely. Let's
Mm-hmm.
fire it up. Fire it up. If
I
anyone
like
in
it.
chat has any questions, please drop them in. Just again, real quick, welcome to Howdy Partner. We show APN solutions. Today we have LaunchDarkly there with Mr. Cody. And welcome to the show. Prachi's joining me, and we're going to dive in to some LaunchDarkly hands-on stuff. Please check out the links I keep dropping in chat and up on the banners as well. And let's fire this up. I see it here.
Yeah. So I always explain this to people whenever I do streaming things. If I'm looking over here, I'm looking at James and Prachi, and I'm looking at the stream. When I'm looking over here, I'm looking at the app. So it doesn't. I'm not distracted and talking to other people. I'm actually talking to you over there. But when I'm controlling the app, it's over here. So
I'm
I would
feeling
like
it.
to
I'm
let people
feeling
know.
attacked. Sorry, I was gonna say I'm feeling attacked because I've got like 3 screens and like 4 different comms going on, so I'm constantly like I'm listening, but then at the same time I'm like, okay,
I'm
doing all
trying to
this stuff.
balance.
Yeah.
Can
So-
you sorry, can
Go-
you zoom just to like 1 or 2 more?
Absolutely.
There we go. Perfect.
How are we feeling about that? Are we feeling good?
Mm-hmm.
Solid. So this is a LaunchDarkly environment, right? This is one that we use for our conference booths. Whenever we're at conferences, I built this application. It's a Next.js based application or React based application. We're not going to spend too much time in the code today at all. I'm just going to show the actual app itself. If we get a ton of questions in the chat, I can fire up the code and we can get really deep. But for now, this is what it looks like. So just giving a lay of the land before I bring up the app and show you all that and give you the URL to connect to. Actually, we'll skip ahead to that and get you the URL so that we can actually have you all see it live. So let's see if I can get in chat.
Oh, cool.
I'm going to drop this into our private chat if you all can share that out. That'd
Yeah.
be great. Cool. So this is the LaunchDarkly UI. I'll give you kind of the broad strokes, and we can go explore as much as we want. I told James beforehand I like random questions, so we can go wherever you all want to explore. Top left, we have all of the different projects inside of our environment. This is a massive demo environment that we use, but projects are how you separate different maybe applications. That might be the store application or the HR application, and then environments are the different like sub environments of that. So maybe test, prod, QA as an example. Some people use projects to break up larger logical chunks of the app. So they might say like the store portion of the app versus the login portion of the app. I don't recommend that. I like to keep my entire application inside of one project just to kind of avoid like the confusion of where things are at. I like it all collated, and like using tags to organize them is generally like what I recommend. These are all the feature flags that are active inside of my application right now. So these are in the code, pushed into the environment, and most of them are turned off right now. So they're not showing up. I'm going to go ahead and bring the app itself up now. And I've got this feature. What was that?
Oh, I was going to say, is flight school, do you actually have a flight school, or is that name of a product?
That is one of our academy training programs. So we have a LaunchDarkly Academy. It's like an education program where people can go and learn. That they do a training. They call it Flight School, which is a pretty cool name.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
So I've got this QR code feature flag here. What this is going to do is, as you might guess, turn on a QR code. So if you're looking at the page on your browser right now, you'll see it on my left side of my browser. You can see that shows up. You can scan it with your phone right now. So if you grabbed your phone and scanned that QR code, it would launch on the phone. It's really cool at like the booth when you have like 10 people show up and you do this live, and you can do like percentage rollouts with all of them and show it gradually roll out. But what you'll find is when you bring it up on your phone, you don't see the QR code. The QR code's not there at all. If I dive into this feature flag, you'll see I have a targeting rule in place. And what this targeting rule says is, if the device is a mobile device, turn the QR code off. So this is how we start to control the features that are rolled out to users based on different properties. So in this case, you're not gonna be able to scan a QR code from your device that's on your device screen. There's not an easy way to do that. So you just don't need to see it. So I turn it off. In this case, it's off, but for everybody else, it's turned on. So go back to like the most basic version of a feature flag. Here we've got a regular website displayed over here. I'm going to zoom out a little bit on this now so I can see the toggle there. The most basic version of feature flag is the true or false feature flag, right? So I turn this on, the page updates with a new screen. If there was a problem with that, I could turn it off just as fast, disable it, and it's gone. I can log in here, right? So I have just a basic little login screen. Cody logs in. And now I'm logged in as Cody. And what we've done in the background here is the LaunchDarkly SDK that's installed as part of the application has taken my identity and transmitted it up to LaunchDarkly and said, hey, Cody has these properties. So we want to be able to target things from Cody now if we want to. So Cody's in specific groups. Cody's configured a specific way. We can make sure Cody is able to see the features that he wants to see. So something like changing the background style, we can see there's a few people in this targeting rule already. The default is to show a standard grid background, but these different users are going to receive a different version. If I turn this on now and save it, no change happens inside of the application itself, right? Because I'm not part of the targeting rule. We talk a lot about this idea of testing in production. And like, I came from software deployments. Like I came from my parents, but my job came from software deployments. And whenever people would say like, you could test this in production, that was always like a really scary thing, because it's like, I'm not trying to generate a new resume event. Like I need to protect myself from that. But think about what makes you afraid of testing in production. It's impact to unexpected users. It's outages. It's downstream system impacts that you're not aware of. If I can control all of those things as much or as little as I want, my fear of testing in production kind of goes away for the most part, because I'm able to manage the risk entirely. And so in this case, I've rolled out a new background change. It's turned on. The code has been shipped, but it's only turned on for these specific users. So there's a person cam in here. If I came in and I did cam, we see Cam is getting a different configuration than Cody was. But again, clearing this out, Cody, I see nothing. This is the most basic version of a targeting rule, but people take this same logic and make it very, very big. There's a streaming provider who sells hardware. They target based on physical device. So they roll out new functionality to the newest devices first, right? So if they have 3 versions of their hardware, they roll out their changes. They do targeting off of the version of that hardware. So V3 gets the features first. V2 gets the features next, then down to V1. And then as they get more like releases out, they'll start to deprecate out those previous versions. They'll say, we don't even push this anymore to V1 because the hardware just can't handle it anymore.
Yeah. I like, my question I was going to ask was, it goes so, I mean, I've typed it in the chat. It goes so fast. It rolls out so quick. Like, is there anything, I don't have a better word for it. How does that work? Is there any magic behind it? Like, or is it just literally flipping on in the code and just rolling out like instantly? How does that work?
There's a lot to this actually behind the scenes. We have something that we call the flag delivery network. Well, let me step back a little bit and talk architecture briefly of like how LaunchDarkly actually works.
Is this where the
what's that?
Is this where the slides might come in?
This is actually, I should have had these in the slides, and I did not add this to the slides.
Oh, okay.
So bummer on that. But we have the LaunchDarkly core infrastructure. You know what? We'll go off script for a second. Give me 2 seconds, and I will pull up an architecture slide that we can actually use.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm genuinely curious. Because even further from, I mean, we always keep bringing back to version control, but like it just goes so fast. It's blows my mind that, because even when we did the game day quest, the LaunchDarkly game day quest, and even then I feel like we had to do little, like in the game day quest itself, like it took a little bit of time, but like you just literally flipped it and I saw in real time you do it, and then on my other screen. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. It's we actually, like, I mean, we all work inside of the vendor space. You know that, like, in the competitive space, we all pick the things that we want to focus on, that we want to build for our companies the best. And architecture was what we focused on, is making sure that when somebody toggles a feature, that it consistently changes for everybody at the same time. And so like we optimize around this concept. And so there's a couple of like layers that make that possible. And you should be seeing the update, like the screen, right? The architecture slide that I have up. in
Yeah.
theory. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's two kind of components at play here. There's the core environment, which is this represented here, just has these random three little circles with the LaunchDarkly logo in them. That's our core. The LaunchDarkly core environment is where things like the UI live. It's like the control plane functionality. And then across the globe, we have over 100 points of presence where we're transmitting flag values out from, and things like initializations are happening. So initialization is when the system turns, like the application turns on and pulls down its first set of feature flags. We benchmark that at sub 20 milliseconds. So we want people to be able to initiate extremely fast, initialize rather extremely fast. That is what that translates to is the first time you see the application. You shouldn't have to wait, 3 seconds for the first time the feature flags come down. We benchmark changes at around 200 milliseconds. So anytime I make a change in the UI, it should reach its endpoint within 200 milliseconds and be updated and visible for the user. So both of those happen at different places. Initialization happens against the points of presence, and then updates happened against the core, and that's that 200 millisecond one.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Those three, you said three random logos. Are those really random, or are those like actual like regions or locations?
Those are actually random. I just put the three circles there.
Oh, okay.
those are we operate in a multi-availability zone angle, so like these are distributed across multiple availability zones, but like this one is not in the center of the Atlantic. The example is like hanging out in the bottom of the ocean. We haven't gotten that advanced yet.
I was gonna say, yeah, is there an island out there that you guys own or something?
LaunchDarkly Island. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. So yeah, so any actual changes roll out a little bit longer, but 200 milliseconds is still nothing.
No, it's nothing. It's fast.
Yeah, that's insane.
And that's what we benchmark off of, and we continue to like optimize the service around that aspect. Like our belief is that you don't want inconsistency is the frustration here, right? Is when I toggle a feature and you see it update on your version of the web page, but then like a mobile phone gets it 3 seconds later. Like enough of those events happen, and it creates frustration. It creates just bad experience. So we optimize around everyone receiving that at the same time. A few things we do around that: we stream the changes down. So when somebody connects to LaunchDarkly and they get the full set of flag values, we only transmit the changed ones from then on, instead of just sending them all down every single time. In our demo, we have 5 feature flags. It's not going to break anything. But think about someone who has 100 or someone who has 1,000. We definitely have people that have 1,000 feature flags. You don't want to be sending that entire payload every single time. So we stream those changes down, only the things that change, to keep it small and fast.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I get it now. Rather than okay.
Yeah, that is actually what I was going to ask you next. That does it affect the latency if, say, the number of flags or feature flags increases? But I think, yeah, makes sense now.
Yep, and in reality, they're stored in memory. So when we're transmitting the flag down, it's actually getting written into the memory, and the evaluation is happening against the in-memory store. So it's extremely fast anyways. We don't really see latency in that way. We see it like in extremely large applications. We're seeing still under a second of latency as this stuff comes on, as it evaluates the flags. What we see is like a lot of like the struggle comes with like conditional renders, like where someone says, hey, I'm going to push down a JSON and I'm going to do evaluations against that JSON and say, if this, grab this JSON value, but if not, like complex logic is what starts to choke it up. It's not really the LaunchDarkly service. It's like the complex logic of like pulling out different values and doing things with them.
Yeah, I believe 100 seconds is still much better than the conventional way of doing it. Like it saves a lot of time and effort. So yeah.
Yeah, again, like think about like in this case here, the UI, the login UI breaks and something you have to re-roll it back. At minimum, you're gonna have 5 to 10 minutes as it redeploys out the previous like container in the best case scenarios, like everything stabilizes back out again. Being able to just quickly say, nope, I think that's broken, we're just going to turn it off and have it roll back for everybody. Like that's an incredibly powerful thing.
Yeah, and again, in real life scenario, most of these changes are planned only in case of, say, emergencies or some errors. we need it to be fast. So 100 seconds would be nothing for a plan change, I think.
Totally. And so like it gets really interesting. Like one of my other favorite ones, that like, so we all understand now like the ground floor idea of like a feature flag. We kind of hammered that into the ground, but like think about like the operational use cases. Like my favorite one that we don't talk about as often is this idea of like when we push a string value down to change a configuration. We have one customer who does this with like Nginx, where they push, they change the logging value for individual users based on a feature flag. So if you called me and said, "Hey, the page isn't loading right. I'm seeing some weird errors coming up," I could enable the debugging feature flag for you, target only you, and then I would be receiving Nginx logs only for you. No one else is getting those logged. I have a clean log trail. I'm able to say only modify this for James and validate, like I can validate off of him. So like that's an example of an operational feature flag. It's not really a feature that we're rolling out, right? We didn't develop anything new, but we're changing the experience of someone and we're changing a configuration for someone to give us better intelligence around debugging, which I think is just like an incredibly interesting like operational use case.
Yeah, no, got it. That's pretty cool because yeah, that's otherwise painful to do and retrieve those logs and to maintain a different trail. That's I've been there. I've been in QA, and it's not easy. It's painful
Well,
to
no one
do
wants
that.
to walk the customer through like manually. Go in, press F12,
Yeah.
go click on this option, fill in. I'm going to send you a specific value, paste this into the cookies, and reload the page. Like those instructions are always frustrating. The customer doesn't want to do that. Like when we can manage this inside of the control plane and push that down, it's just a better experience for everybody.
Yeah, and I also would like to add, I think it's not something that you mentioned in terms of say use cases, but you mentioned something about testing. But I've been a QA tester before. I know how painful it is, and because I was a tester, they often teams or managers they often suggest testers to give demo at the sprint end to customers. So I know how useful this can be if I have to create my demo environment for customers because I have to otherwise clean up the entire QA environment, set up things for my demo, go back and forth, and this can be super easy if I have to provide a demo.
Totally. We do we see interesting people like QA teams use it for testing, and what they'll do is they'll create like a QA user and they'll target different variations to that
Yeah.
QA user, right? So they can test out different versions of the web page and like measure return responses, measure database performance, all
Yeah.
based off of like their QA users, like when they're running automated tests. Like it's super interesting stuff.
Definitely, yeah.
Another interesting one that just popped into my head, it's like a totally different angle, is I know of a security team that when somebody hits their website too often and looks malicious, like they have a bunch of like intelligent threat monitoring, and when it looks suspicious, they'll drop them into a group that is controlled by a LaunchDarkly segment. Segments are just groups of users inside of
Oh, yeah.
LaunchDarkly, but
That's
they'll
so
drop them
cool.
into that and it rate limits them. And so it's a feature that reduces the rate at which those users can pull their API. So they'll go from having like unrestricted access to down to like 5 requests a minute or whatever. So they can still access it, but they're drastically controlled. And then the security team reviews everybody who's in this group and either, permanently bans ones that are malicious or removes ones that are valid, but it gives them like an automated way to start to remediate like threat problems. Again, not a feature, but everything's a feature to somebody, right? Like everything is a feature to somebody inside of an organization. It's just a matter of who's the consumer of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely like it's just thinking of it in a different way. It's the same tool, but it's just using it in totally different ways. And that's where I fail at trying to explain what this stuff is because I come from that developer mindset. So when you explain it like that, I love hearing that, and that's when I just have that light bulb, like I think outside the box kind of thing. It just blows my mind.
It's the that and that's like what's so fun about like it's fun working on a product like this because the ground floor is something we can all relate to. Like we all understand like the ground floor concept, but like and then we all have our own ideas that come off of it. And it's like, yeah, there's these common things that are like, yeah, it's a no-brainer solution, right? Like I get it, that makes sense. But then you start thinking about like the interesting ways you could like you could take this and tweak it. Like we use it for our workshops. When I want to turn on a workshop to run with customers, I turn the flag on and they can now check out credentials. When we're done for the day, I turn it off and now no one can access it. Like just weird outside the box like ways of using the system that people don't always think of.
Yeah. And then also we mentioned, just going back real quick to the log thing earlier. Yeah, having to dig, if you have someone has a problem and you have to dig through a billion logs, that's insane. But just being able to flip it and just see that one person. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. With what you described, where press F12, type this into your cookies, whatever. That sounds like people are gonna like light bulb and think it's a scam, because that's how a lot of like scams are done nowadays. Is people tell, oh, open your browser, open this, type in this, and then all of a sudden people go, wait, like this sounds like a scam. Like,
Totally.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, I've seen these kind of shows on Twitch myself, and this is what it's starting to sound like.
It doesn't turn out well.
Yeah.
So cruising forward in the demo just to create more interesting things. I can turn on this API menu, and I could lock this down to specific users also. I don't in this demo because the next one is the more interesting one. Right now I'm connected to one version of the database, right? But I can come in here and I can say, I can control targeting on like a database rollout. Like this is probably one of my favorite things to show off, because I've been a part of so many database migrations and how scary those are, and like what goes wrong and how sensitive they are to performance. And like, it's really challenging to know if you've scaled it to the right size, right? Like, and so a lot of people default to these massive databases because like, what if we can't handle the performance hit? But when you have like full control over that and you can manage that user experience, like I can come in and roll out this database to everybody and it changes instantly. So this is actually on the back end, like this isn't fake. Like this is actually going from using a local data to using a DynamoDB connection. So I have a Dynamo table inside of my AWS environment that this now starts connecting to. When I turn it back off, it goes back to the local data inside the platform. So it's like a Python API server calling out and rendering that data out. But with one person, you're never going to have performance hits or performance risk. All of the West Coast, maybe like when you expand up to Central, so you have West Coast and Central, all of a sudden, like, wow, we now have 3 or 2/3 of the United States hitting the same database. Maybe we will hit performance problems. And when you have this ability to like fine grain control these rollouts, like this is, to me, this is like the operations dream of being able to like roll something out, control who's experiencing it, measure the experience, and if there's a problem, stop it, roll back to the good part, scale up your service, and then continue the rollout forward. Instead of turning it all the way off for everybody, saying, hey, we have to come back in 2 weeks, we're going to re-architect, increase the scale, build a bigger version of this that we can roll out. You can roll that out persistently and do continuous rollouts and things like that. So that's pretty slick.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah. So when you say migrations, like you're talking, let me, how do I say it? So you're starting with one, and then you're migrating as you're migrating everything from. Are you talking about specifically, literally migrating to a new database, or just going between two, or I don't know. I guess.
Yeah. So I'll give a couple of like really like cool examples of it. Okay. There's the ground floor, most basic version of, hey, I have a version of my API that's on premises in my data center, and I'm moving to use API Gateway in AWS, right? Partner plug. I'm moving to AWS and I want to move to API Gateway there. I could wrap that change in a feature flag and say, hey, my dev team now is consuming APIs out of AWS. So I want anyone in this user group to actually be hitting these APIs instead, right? So that's a traditional migration, right? I'm going from location A to location B, and I want to move people over to that. What we add on is the ability to get granular on that and say, only these people and only at this rate that I want people to gradually roll over to. So that's one version of like a migration. The other version is I want to move between 2 different technologies. I'm in API Gateway, and yeah, it works out well, but I really want to move to a different version of this. I actually want to move to a different service inside of AWS to handle this capability. So again, that's in like less of a migration, but more like an adoption of a new technology. Still a migration technically, but
Yeah.
you're adopting something new. Same concept applies. Databases work roughly the same way. What's interesting with the database one is there's a lot of solutions to like move an entire database at once. You still don't get the granularity in the same way that you get here, but like we can get down to a table level and we can say inside of this entire database, I'm only going to move one table at a time. So this table now is in a Dynamo table inside of AWS. All the other tables inside of my application still live on premises, but my user data is now in AWS, and I'm going to call that instead. So like the granularity of that migration there is the power.
Okay. Got it. Cool. Yeah. I'm trying to prerequisites. What are the prerequisites?
That's a good one. So a lot of times what we advocate for is breaking your code apart into like manageable chunks, right? So you can say, this is my login function, this is my database function, all of those things, and having those controlled with feature flags. And breaking those apart is good for being able to independently develop each one of those. But at a certain point, development's good, and you want to say, hey, you can only turn on the UI component of this feature when the API is turned on. So prerequisites let you create a relationship between feature flags and to say one can only be on when the other is turned on. So like using this application as an example, if I go back and look at the way this flows, I roll out a new UI, I change the background style. I might say I only want to be able to have the background style feature flag work if the UI is turned on. Right. And so it lets you create a dependency between those to control if it can be on or not. So people use this to manage like several flags. You might say this flag has to be on in order for any of these to be able to work. Or you get really basic with it and say just one at a time. I want this sequence to be followed. So this one can only be on when the API is on, which can only be on when the server flag is on, all of those things. So just let you create dependencies between feature rollouts.
Got it. So it's kind of for having a cascading or an hierarchical effect, if you can say so. Okay.
Totally.
Got it. And what about, so I just had this question in my mind. So you mentioned that we can create feature flags to say if I want only James to see a particular version or a feature for testing purposes. But is there a way to say manage different environments or compare what's on, what's off in different environments, or say even replicate?
Not necessarily from a comparison standpoint, like if you have multiple environments comparing between those, not so much from a comparison. We can definitely, obviously, like the flag dashboard here lets us see everything that's on in a given project and environment. We can start to retire out flags. So like if we felt like the QR code's no longer used, we can archive that out and remove it like when we're done. So like temporary features will often use those to disable a feature or take away a feature that's already done and completed. We can see where flags are used in code inside of code references. So this actually ties into your actual application code. So you can see this is hitting my LD Booth demo repo. And this shows me inside of my actual application code where this feature is being used. So the QR code is only in src/app.js, and it's referenced on line 11 and line 50. And so you can see where code is being used within the application. This one's not quite as interesting as like looking at something like, let's see if we can get into the database one. That one's probably a little bit more interesting. Yeah, this one's a little bit more interesting because this one's in a few more places. Like this is pulling it out of a connection helper that I have inside. And so we can see where the code's actually being used. And that helps give us better visibility into like the actual code usage.
Got it. Okay.
Kind of going, this is probably almost a similar question, but is there a way you could like visually like diff two different setups you have, or like I guess a better way to say it, is there a way you could have presets of like, say you mentioned someone that has like 1,000 feature flags. Is there a way, I don't want to have to go and click for one user, I'm supposed to have these 600 on and those 400 off. Is there like different profiles you could have where you could just say, do this all at once rather than having to go on, off,
Yeah, you'd probably do that with using like segments and targeting to like dynamically control that. Because usually you wouldn't be, most commonly, like you're not changing 20 of these a day on and off amongst many people. You're like kind of setting up these environments and setting up the rules as needed to like conditionally evaluate true, false, or what value. So you do a lot of that inside of like segment creation, which are just like different pools of users that would be added to those features. And when they're in those groups, they're getting it versus not. There's not like a visual diff in the sense of here's my, this group of users have this set of value and I want to make that match over here. You would just add them to the correct targeting groups. That way they're kind of dynamically getting it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess when you put it that way, it makes more sense. You would just set up the different segments kind of ahead of time, and then just add people between the, similar to like users and groups in AWS. Yeah, you're not going to turn them all on. You're not going to go and create an individual user with individual permissions for every single person. You're going to create a role or a group and just stick people in it. So,
Yeah.
dumb question, but not dumb question, I guess.
No, but like, I mean, you say dumb question, but like, I'm sure you ran into many a customer who creates an IAM role for every person inside of their team, and it's like, this is Cody's role, and it's like, okay, like
Cody's role, yeah.
you can do it that way, but can we talk about a better way?
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be really challenging when you get to like 300 users and you're trying to find Cody's role inside of 300 users, or especially if like 200 of those are the exact same style, right? Like standard user management at that point.
Yeah. Okay.
The other one that's fun to check out is like going into the context, which are like the different ways, different like things that have been pushed into LaunchDarkly. So if I hit this, we can see this is the context for me. This is a very, very basic context, not a lot of detail in there. But for this user who came in, I can see all of these are the feature flags that they're receiving. I also see the different versions of the SDK that are connecting. So in this case, this is the React one. User, Cody, coming in from a browser device on a Mac OS. And I can see the feature flags that I receive, and I can come in here. The Nginx example I gave, this is where they do that. They come in and they set it in here. So they'll look up the Cody user, and they'd come into this like debug feature flag and set it to, debug mode for them and save it. And that gives them like the individual targeting that they want to be able to do. So this is basically all the users who have connected to this application today.
Just today. Nice.
Yeah.
How about, I mean, I guess I'm just kind of going off the list on the left. It was like, can you talk about experiments and live events? What is
so experiments, we talked about that a little earlier. That was like being able to measure the effectiveness. Like in this case, that banner on the top of the screen. If I move this back over, this guy up top here, see if it refreshes. It may not because my session's sticky. There we go. So if I click, see how it's changing up top?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I have an experiment running that's measuring which one results in the most clicks. So does red result in people clicking it the most often? I don't know.
Okay. So it's kind of an A/B testing environment.
Oh, totally. It's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Absolutely A/B testing. And so like we can see the values here. So red with white text is the one that tends to be clicked the most. Is the data is what the data shows. Is that more often than not people click it when it's red. And blue with white text is the least popular.
So it basically helps us assess that what color grabs attention or traction, or basically. Okay. That's cool.
And this is a real basic, because this is just like a banner, but like it becomes really useful for things like stores where people want to measure who's like engaging with stuff. Or imagine when you use this to measure how fast a response back is from a new database you've adopted, right? Being able to measure and say, when we rolled out the new database, the majority of our users received a response time that was less than 8 milliseconds, right? Like that's data that you can capture as part of experimentation.
That's awesome.
Live events is for troubleshooting. Just real quick, like this lets you see live events that are happening as they come into the platform. So in a few moments here, so we can see it's going to pull every evaluation effectively and lets you see all of those that are happening. The experiments, if I come up here, in theory, when I click this, we should in a moment see, there it goes. So we're seeing the experimentation events fire. And it does like a dedupe behind the scenes to handle that. That's like a distributed call. So it'll dedupe that behind the scenes. But that's like just showing the live events as they hit the system. And then audit log lets you track all the activities that are happening within, right? So when James comes in and starts turning off features for the people he doesn't like, we can see that and take action against him on his performance review.
Yeah, I'm playing around with it now. So like, for example, if I type my name in to the users here and submit.
Yeah, so hold on 1 second. We'll go back in. Yep. So go ahead and hit it.
Oops, let me clear. Sorry.
And in a few moments, we should see last one up there. So we see an evaluation come through overall.
I'm a debug user. Nice.
No, that was a different. That was a different setting one. So I think it's catching up on events.
There we are. That's me.
There he is.
That's cool. I love this. And I love the experiment. I could just imagine 2 UX developers arguing for days, and then you just throw in an experiment to, you could place bets around the office about who's the better UX designer, and you could prove it with data. Like,
I love it.
The office pool.
And that is what I wrote in chat as well. Otherwise, it's pretty difficult to test this A/B testing case scenarios, and this makes it like quite easy.
And I think like when you keep because there's other experimentation platforms out there, but when you keep them so close to the features that are like the functionality you're rolling out, and like you have this central place, because like our dream is that teams come together to do this stuff. So you have the designers who are running experiments and measuring the effectiveness of things they're building, PMs that are rolling out changes inside of their environments or rolling out targeting rules. We have developers turning on and off functionality, help desk teams disabling when things are broken. Like we want to that's why we consider it more of a feature management platform, because platforms are places where teams come together to collaborate. It's not just a developer tool. It's a thing where people come together and collaborate on releasing software. That's like the most marketing thing I've ever said, for the record.
That's okay. We'll hold it against you.
Please do.
Speaking of, my next questions were going to be, I guess, more from the less interesting side, but we can always roll back. My questions were going to be around like, how do you do users in here? For example, do you use like identity federation? Do you use Active Directory? Do you create just specific users?
So it's within your application typically. And so there's 2 layers to this. Within your application, when it registers with LaunchDarkly, when it turns on, it's communicating up your user data. So like inside of your application logic, you want to handle that however you normally would. So like I did an example where I used a Cognito to build like a login engine, and I was able to pull properties from that and add those properties to the user object. And that's like a common thing. It's a pretty lightweight task to do. Targeting rules are a little bit different in the sense of like segments and how we populate those. We have integrations for that to be able to integrate with other systems and pull in like groups that we want to, things like amplitude and stuff like that, that we can integrate with to pull that data in. But most commonly what we see is people really like spending their energy grabbing that metadata from their like login process and sending that as part of like their LaunchDarkly login. When they log in inside of their app and it sends that login data up to LaunchDarkly, they're usually bringing whatever like federated login data or whatever data Cognito gives back, or Auth0 or whatever identity provider you're using, whatever that returns back, they're sending that up along with it. I did like a fun demo where I integrated with like GitHub Auth as an example, and so I was able to pull like my avatar and all of that
cool.
GitHub data and push it up as part of my login bundle, and then I'm able to target off of all of that. So.
And then as a side to that, when I want to use, I'm a customer, I'm an enterprise, I have 1 billion developers that want to use LaunchDarkly. Am I able to do that in the UI here to create those different users? I'm asking more specifically about LaunchDarkly itself. Like
Oh,
once
so
I
like
sign on.
adding users and stuff. Yeah. So
Yeah. No,
like
but your first one was totally cool. I love that. Yeah.
we obviously have like, there's a licensing model, so like seats and people who are available inside of the platform, and like billing things, what's actually available inside of the product. Like this is obviously an unlimited account because it's a company account, but like you have seats, and like as you do those, you can add people in. So like I could come in and add people to the members. I could invite additional users into it. So if I was a small company with 20 seats, I could invite up to 20 developers. I could import that as like a large CSV, for example, or a number of different ways. We have SSO integration, so you could tie into your SSO providers if you wanted to. Like internally for the real LaunchDarkly instance, it's all SSO. So when I log into my single sign-on portal, it uses LaunchDarkly SSO to connect in. And those auto provision if we need to, and all that.
Okay. And then I was going to get a little more markety. Like, what does it look like as far as costing? You mentioned license model. Is it specific per contract, per use, per flag, per?
So there's kind of two components to it. There's what we call monthly active users. And so that's like the amount of users access. That's usually a very big number, for the record. Like I think like the smallest plan is in like the hundreds of thousands. I don't quote me. Like I don't stick
No. Yeah.
But like I think it's like in the hundreds of thousands of users. And then there's your seat-based licenses, which are like your developers accessing the system. So you pay for both of those at some level. So like the three of us would be 3 seat licenses, but if we have an application that's doing 2 million connections a month, 2 million unique users every single month, we pay for that too.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
Like people get started. There's a $5 tier, for example, where people go get started and have like basic feature flagging and like however many evaluations that is in a 1 seat, and that scales all the way up to however many you need inside of an enterprise.
Got it. And when you say licensing, so it's other types of users, when it comes to licensing, or it's just one, just per user, or do you divide it between say developers or permissions a particular user would get?
Yeah, it's basically seat licenses. So
Okay.
every seat on this plane is the same. So
Yeah.
southwest.
Cool.
The seat, it's the same thing.
I wish it was true in real life as well, Cody.
Yeah. Right. I don't know how that works sometimes. Sometimes when they overbook and I'm not assigned a seat, I end up with a better one. I don't know how that. Whatever. I'll take it. And then I guess the last one on there I wanted to ask about was the integrations tab. What is, as far as that integrations tab, what does that look like?
Yeah, so these are all like different systems that like we can integrate.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we mentioned it, but I didn't like specifically think of all this stuff, I guess.
Totally. So like really like popular one that we talk about a lot with AWS is like we have a data export ability. So all like the events, evaluations, and all that stuff, we can send those out as like a data export into like Kinesis for evaluation. So we have like a Kinesis integration inside of here that we can send data out to for evaluation. So things like that. But like we have data log integrations for observability, stuff like that are all options.
Okay. Yeah, we totally mentioned the VS Code one earlier, and then I didn't expand on that, and curious about it. Slack app, nice.
Yep, so you can control the stuff with chat ops and stuff like that.
Yeah. My favorite one I always ask about, is there a Jira or Asana so some poor on-call guy can get?
It was super cool. Like the Jira integration is really good.
Nice.
The Jira integration is solid.
Cool.
One of my favorite ones is like you look at some of the observability ones we have, like Datadog or Dynatrace, like some of the observability tools. We can actually have them automatically disable a feature if there's a problem. So using like the login example I talked about before, if you're getting like 100 errors a second on a feature, or like on a thing you released, there's a problem. So we can actually have the system automatically turn those off using flag triggers. So we can say, hey, I want Honeycomb to be able to automatically set this to off based on a certain set of criteria inside of Honeycomb. So it'll fire an event and that'll disable the feature automatically. So you create like self-healing systems that way.
Yeah, that's cool. Like, so you're kind of building in back off and those kind of things just through those. Nice. Cool. Again, real quick, just if you're just tuning in, welcome to Howdy Partner. We're joined by LaunchDarkly. They're showing us their feature flags and all the ways that we can use them. Many out of the box kind of use cases for example, security also as well. A/B type testing. I'm joined by Cody Arkland from LaunchDarkly, and this is awesome. I love it. I'm not a shill. I love this kind of stuff.
I was looking at integrations as well, and I found most of the communication tools that we use, like Slack, Teams, that's all also integrated. So that's cool as well. So if you want to track notifications, intimate someone, that's good.
Awesome. I can't think of anything else from myself at the moment. Prachi, is there anything you could think of?
Not really. I was looking at the platform parts. I'm just on the website itself. I was looking at something when it comes to data analytics and data export. If you could elaborate a bit on that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so like we talked about it super briefly, but like the idea is like as we get into places where we want to start to understand more about like user traffic or the way users are evaluating or system events, right? Like you want to take that experimentation data and you want to see the raw data so that you can interact with it yourself and like do analytics against it. We can use data export to send that out to things like Kinesis to do analytics against or to do evaluation against and really pick apart that data and get better analytics around it. So data export's very popular. We use that so that people can, because not everyone wants to stay inside of the LaunchDarkly UI for that stuff. They don't want to sit there and like scroll through the page. They want to just feed that data into another system and have it analyze it, chew that data up, and produce results out. So data export's used a lot for that.
Content. Okay. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
and especially if there's a tool or something that everyone already uses or like enterprise wise, they already have their massive, some already has sunk cost into a massive BI type contract. They're like, we need to get some use out of this, so that's good that that's there too, that they can yank those out and then do what they want. Right tool for the right. One of the things is right tool for the right job. If that's not fitting your model, then being able to have it agnostic that way is definitely another bonus for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I just saw, Cody, if you could shed some light on this, I was looking at solutions and industry. I can see government as well there. So I'm assuming it's FedRAMP. FedRAMP is already there. So can you give us a use case or an example of where it can be used by, say, government agencies, something, how it's different from the tech?
Yeah, I think what I see in a lot of like government agencies is a lot of like the front end use cases where they're updating parts of their website, they're changing parts of the workflow, they want to measure how effective new developments they're doing inside of there are. Some of them are starting to move into like GovCloud and things like that, wanting to move their systems into like more like different cloud-based services. So they'll use it for migrations. But I think most commonly it's a lot of like the front end and like system level use cases that we see people like just doing general development using it.
Got it. Okay. So that's cool. It's also FedRAMP approved. So that's cool as well again.
Yeah, that was kind of, she sparked my idea. So say, like my company has to be SOC 2, has to be whatever it is, like GPCR, the European one. GPR, like, we have to have these 10 different compliance issues. I mean, this could be a yes or no easy question. Does integrating LaunchDarkly with my stuff meet those things, or are those any caveats? Do I need to talk to my auditor, et cetera, et cetera?
A lot of it does come down to like auditor conversations. For the most part, we've been successful in those situations. There are some like edge cases where people have very specific requirements that like But even then, we're like able, for example, like some people have very specific requirements around like on premises. They need it to be an on premises solution for control. Well, we have like something called the relay proxy that lets us do evaluation locally, and then they're able to like place security controls around that device to communicate back to LaunchDarkly. And so they're able to use that for like the on-prem solution or place it inside of their secured VPC. And that tends to like abate the concerns that have auditors typically worried. But for the most part, we're able to get through those. We're able to get pretty fine grained on the data that we communicate back. So like you can mark attributes as private and say, hey, I want to be able to evaluate these locally, but I don't want to send a social security number for obvious reasons to LaunchDarkly. But I still want to be able to evaluate off of that and say anybody whose number ends in a 5, gets this feature. Well, we can keep those local and do local evaluation for those, but restrict them from being communicated out. So we're able to protect from like HIPAA and things like that. Those are all functionality that exist. Private attributes are great for that.
Yeah. That's because that's always, and one of our primary things that me and Prachi do are workload validations, and that's like always one of the controls is what kind of compliances do you have to have, and how are you, give us a high level of how you're accomplishing those, and then, so I want to be able to say, yeah, use LD for some of this stuff for sure.
100%.
Yeah. Cool. So I guess the next thing we wanted to talk about a little bit was the migration summit that you have coming up.
Yeah. So coming up in a few weeks here. I think it's like actually the 3rd week of July, if I remember right. We have a migrate. So we have these summit events that kind of focus on our core use cases. So we did releases last month, where we talked all about just the basic software release process and just improving that. This next one is all about migration. So we're getting a couple of customers. Words are hard. Getting a couple of customers together to talk about how they use LaunchDarkly for migrations. We got AWS speaking at it to do a talk around using LaunchDarkly to drive AWS migrations. We do a nice little demo thing where we go through and show off functionality in the product. I'm moderating a talk with one of our really, really great product managers who's going to talk about some of the new functionality coming up in the next couple of months inside the platform. So there's a little bit of like a preview session around new features. New features are always good talks to get into because you get to see a little preview of what's to come. So we're going to talk about that. So it's really it's shaping up to be a really cool event. And so that I see the link scrolling across the bottom. Check that out. It's a free event to attend. Come hang out with us. I'll be there. Peter McCarron from my team is going to be emceeing the whole thing. But it's going to be a fun event. Last one we had, I think around 500 people show up for it, which was really cool. Hoping to hit around that again.
Yeah. Okay. And that's I'm not going to lie. I didn't click it myself yet. That's a virtual event?
It is a virtual event. Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. So I don't have to go get my travel approval for that. So
nope. Away. And then the other thing is, I think you have the link for this also. We have a community hub. We've been really working on like building out our LaunchDarkly community. We have a Discord channel on there. If you saw anything in here that you want more information about, you want to talk with like-minded folks about software releases, come in there, hang out inside of that community hub link. There's a link to our Discord server. Come hang out with us, talk about LaunchDarkly, ask questions. A lot of us, like, we have support team members in there. If you're having a problem, we have people from product, marketing, a couple of leaders are in there. It's growing to be. We launched that about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago now. We started getting really good traffic around it. So come hang out with us. Be friendly.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Like you literally have people just sitting in the Discord. I mean, not just sitting, but like you can actually just talk live with LD people in your Discord.
Yep.
That's cool. I never even thought of that myself. God, there's so many things that I've said that about 15 times. I didn't think of that.
Open it up the dreams.
Yeah, right. Awesome. I guess that's it for my side.
That's what I have for you.
That's all. That's it. Just that. No, just kidding. That was plenty. Great. No, thank you, Cody, for coming and showing us everything. Again, I love LD and I love the products, and I think it's just so cool, honestly, myself. And for anyone that ever gets to participate in a game day, you might be lucky enough. Cody, who developed that game day? Was that you or?
That was me. I did I would say about 90% of it, and then my Peter on my team helped out with a good chunk also. But I'd say 90% of it or so was a long stretch of work on my side.
Nice. Did anyone from the game day team help you with it? I want
Oh
to
yeah,
shout out.
definitely. So I talked about it just from my side, but like Melina was great.
Melina, cool.
Melina's just incredibly huge help. Nothing but good things to say about how much she helped us. And actually, some of the stuff she taught me in that game day is stuff like that I use. Like our entire our booth demo process is all based off the CloudFormation templates that she helped me write for the game day. So I use those. So like, not only did I get to build like a really cool workshop, I actually learned like new AWS skills as part of building that. That was really cool.
Yeah, I've been in the middle of developing a quest myself, and a lot the whole thing about using the central accounts out to the team accounts and all that kind of stuff. It kind of, I don't know, opened my mind was the right way to put it, but it gave me a new perspective of how to think of things.
Totally.
When setting up.
Especially when you're putting up an event together, you just have to think from all the scenarios, all cases. What if this goes wrong? Okay, if we're giving access to this, we need to give access to this. It's a whole cascading effort. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So I'm gonna plug a few things real quick. Anyone watching, please fill out our survey. AWS is done. I always preach this. We love surveys. We love data. Please take 30 seconds. It's only like 3 questions. Fill out our survey. Tell us what you think. If you liked anything, if you didn't like anything, if you don't like me, I mean, but who doesn't like me? Just real quick, yeah, there's a link in the chat scrolling across the screen too. And also, if you want to connect with Cody, you can drop him a line on his Twitter at Cody Arkland. Give him some followers, make him Twitter famous.
I need that. I need more, please. Please.
Yeah. And also, you can connect with LaunchDarkly and Cody on LinkedIn as well. I don't have those up right this second, but those are pretty easy to find. I found them earlier. So yeah, I guess any last things before we check off here?
No, just thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it. It's good to get together with like-minded folk and talk some fun technology.
Yeah,
Yep,
appreciate it.
definitely.
Prachi, anything from you?
Yeah, I first things first, I'll definitely be attending the summit. I love the product. This is the first time I saw it, so I really love it. It like really, yeah, it solved a lot. I hope I had this. I just wish that I had this when I was doing this. So yeah, it would have solved lot of problems for me when I was testing things out. So yeah, I really loved it. We'll definitely be in touch and we'll be attending the summit.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. And so next week we have Rafe coming on to Howdy Partner. So please come check us out next week. Same time, same bat channel, 2 p.m. Pacific till approximately 4 p.m. Pacific. Next Wednesday. It'll be fun. Hope I can see you again. And happy trails to everyone. Bye. Have a good one.
Bye bye.